last but not the least of our plenary speaker is Professor Dr. Father Joáo Vila-Chá. João Vila-Chá entered the Society of Jesus in Portugal, Colombia, 1980, studied philosophy at the Catholic University of Portugal and theology at the Hochschule St. Georgen in Frankfurt, Germany, obtained his doctorate in philosophy at Boston College, where he was also lecturer from 1992 to 1996. He presently is a member of the Faculty of Philosophy at the Gregorian University in Rome, where he arrived in October of 2008 and is now responsible for the St. Thomas More Chair for Ethics and Society. Before arriving in Rome, he was editor-in-chief of the Revista Portuguesa de Filosofia from 2000 to 2009, professor of History of Contemporary Philosophy, Philosophy of Religion, and Theological Philosophy at the Faculty of Philosophy of the Catholic University of Portugal, professor in the Master Program in Bioethics at the Catholic University of Portugal from 2001 to 2006, Director of the Center for Philosophical Research at the Catholic University of Portugal from 2001 to 2007, Director of the Master and PhD Program in Philosophy of Religion at the Faculty of Philosophy of the Catholic University of Portugal from 2005 to 2008, and Chairman of the Jesuit European Jesuits in Philosophy from 2002 to 2008. In November of 2009, he became acting president of the COMUCAP. His talk will be on violence transfigured by language, dialogical alterity, and the redeeming power of discourse. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give Professor João a warm applause.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Professor D, for this kind introduction. Thanks to all of you for being here after this long journey of this Congress, in which so much has been said, so much of so high quality and interest. I'm here due to the most kind invitation of Professor Alfred Koh, and I want to express to him my public gratitude for the invitation, as well as to the University of St. Thomas and to my brothers in religion, the friars of the Dominican Order. This is a beautiful occasion, the celebration of the 400th anniversary of the oldest university in East Asia, and I'm very honored and very pleased to be here. Whatever I'm going to say, I want to say it in first place in honoring the celebration of this institution that gives us this wonderful hospitality, and at the same time I want to honor the Filipino hospitality that all of us are enjoying so much during this days. It's wonderful to be here, and we'll never forget this most generous, kind, and joyous hospitality that we are receiving. Now, what I'm planning to do is a very unusual thing, and maybe I should not do it, but I decided to do it anyway. In fact, I'm not just to present a paper. I decided that maybe I present a paper and an half, or maybe 2 halves of a paper, of 2 different papers, for a very simple reason. I am here because of the organization, the network that I represent, in fact as a successor of Filipino President, Professor Levino Garcia. And I want to say, before I start with my paper proper, a few words about the network that I represented, to which Professor Pope so kindly decided to dedicate this entire day. And I also want to appreciate the contributions that my two predecessors during this day, Professor Chet and Professor Honor, did this morning, also speaking, of course, in their own names, but also as members and in the context of this network of Catholic institutions of philosophy. I appreciate very much that contribution, and so for the sake of clarity and maybe to help and bring about some enthusiasm in some member of the audience for this network, for Coming Up, I would just to say a few words about Coming Up before entering in my paper, as it has already been announced. And what I want to say basically are two things, very short, very briefly. One is to say that Coming Up is in existence since 1999, whereby the first big initiative of the network was the Congress at UNESCO in Paris in March of 2000, the occasion in which the network was officially dedicated and kind of approved. And it's also important to say that Coming Up is the direct result of the publication in 1998 of the encyclical Fides et Ratio by Pope John Paul II. So what I'd like to quote to you now, in order to make it very clear what we are all about, is a few expressions of this speech, this address that Pope Benedict XVI so kindly gave us in October of 2008 when we met in Rome just for the official celebration of the Fides et Ratio. In this speech, and by the way, I know now that Dr. Garcia is not here, but I was thinking of mentioning that his picture was widely distributed, talking to the Pope, or maybe listening to the Pope when he was presented, presenting to the Holy Father a gift in the name of Coming Up. That picture was published, a beautiful one indeed, in the Osservatorio Romano the day after this audience took place. Now, on this occasion, the Holy Father told us the following things. I mean, more than that, but I'm just quoting a few expressions of this address. And I quote from the speech of Pope Benedict. 10 years after its publication, an attentive look at the encyclical Fides et Ratio enables one to perceive admiringly its lasting topicality. It reveals the far-sighted depth of my unforgettable predecessor. In fact, the encyclical is characterized by its great openness to reason, especially in a period in which its weakness was theorized. John Paul II, on the other hand, underlines the importance of combining faith and reason in their reciprocal relationship, yet while also respecting the sphere of autonomy of each. And then the Pope quotes a passage from St. Augustine that I found very interesting, and I also take it as representative of what we in the Catholic philosophical world attempt to do. And the quote that the Pope brought to our attention from Augustine, the great African bishop, and said was this: the truth is not obtained by itself with reasoning, but it is what those who use reason seek. Confess that you are not what the truth is, for it does not seek itself. You, on the other hand, have not attained it by passing from one place to another, but by seeking it with disposition of your mind. And then the Pope concludes the quote from Augustine by saying, the process of reasoning does not create those truths, but it discovers them. Now, when we look at what a network like ours is all about, if you allow me, I would just like to mention a few points that I consider as being, kind of representative of our goals, our vision, our identity. And the first one is this: the promotion of quality and diversity and philosophical research within the diversified context of Catholic higher education. The second, to promote the sustainable development in fields of research and of study in philosophy that may be recognized as particularly relevant for the development of the identity and the mission of the Catholic universities today. Third, identify situations and problems in contemporary societies and cultures that may generate or simply demand new ways of thinking in accordance with values of the gospel and the teachings of the Christian traditions, so that particular attention is given to the need to foster and underline the special relevance and importance of philosophy in the context of Catholic higher education today. Fourth, promote collaborative exchanges of information and services among Catholic men and women dedicated to professional research and teaching in philosophy. Fifth, facilitate the exchange of students and teachers among Catholic institutions of higher education on a global scale. Sixth, develop collaborative strategies to assist deans of faculties and other persons in positions of leadership within Catholic institutions of higher education to better fulfill their roles and mission. And seventh, promote the ever more vital and dialogical relationship between philosophy and theology, as well as between these two disciplines and the other sciences, particularly the ones more directly dedicated to the study of the human condition. So this is, in a nutshell, what I think it might be interesting to consider when we hear this acronym of COMUCAP as the Confédération Mondiale des Institutions Catholiques de Philosophie, so that when we hear this word or use it, we really get the idea about the task and mission and the identity proper to our network. And at the same time, this is, of course, an invitation for all of you to be part of it. If you represent an institution that is not yet a member of COMUCAP, please make sure to become a member. And if you are a professor or graduate student or a representative of another kind of institution that is not able to, for example, grant doctorates in philosophy, you can also become associate members of the network. So I appreciate your attention for this. I really would feel not that my presence here would make much sense if a word like this were not said, in the sense that we, whatever we can learn from one another, whatever we learn, we have to continue to learn and to continue to teach and to continue to research. And when we find a home, be it a university or be it a network like COMUCAP, I think the task ahead is always one of getting further, of developing and fulfilling our goals and our purposes. And with this, I come to my paper. My paper is, as it was announced, on the problem of violence. This is not a Thomistic paper. It's a paper, maybe you could call it, in the sphere of Levinasianism, that is a kind of new Thomism. I know that it's always very, very strange when we place things in too many, in an order that may be convenient for, dealing with things. On the other hand, I think that what really counts when we do philosophy is that we try to respond to the real problems, as was said this morning and yesterday, to the real problems with which we are confronted, that confront humanity on a global scale. Well, I think that one of the most global problems we have now is precisely the problem of violence. And the philosophy that does not have anything to say about this problem is a philosophy that, of course, remains impoverished. So my idea, my goal is precisely to use Emmanuel Levinas as an example and is a suggestion for ways of dealing with this problem that is so close to us, because whenever there is violence, whenever there is an act of destruction, particularly when the destruction affects human life, we are all concerned. So that the problem of violence can by and of itself assume different dimensions is known to us all. In first place, violence can be something suffered in first person. This is the violence that the single I or the communal we suffers at the hands of others. It is violence of which one way or the other we all either have been or might yet become victims. Then there is violence in second person, the violence of which the other is the victim and I, or the we to which I belong, am the perpetrator. This kind of violence must not be confused with the violence of which a second person can be a victim, even though I am not the cause of it. Finally, there is the violence in the third person. That is the violence to which I am neither the victim nor the agent, but simply am a witness, whereby the victim is other than me. We can therefore consider the existence of three main possible and structural kinds of violence, and so precisely according to the measure in which one is the victim of it, the perpetrator of it, or simply witness to it. In each one of the cases, the perception of violence presupposes the existence of both the following: an agent of the violent act, that is, someone in position of being incriminated, a victim of that violence that for the fact deserves support and compassion. In the case of violence in third person, the incrimination of the perpetrators becomes all the more necessary due to the distance that separates the victim and one witnessing the victimization at hand. The event of violence, in order to be understood, presupposes that an human agent be clearly recognized as responsible for the evil that is witnessed, so that the witness may discover him or herself compromised either from the perspective of being an actor or of simply witnessing whatever facts of violence there are. Now, it is precisely in order to understand the intrinsic dynamism of violence and accordingly to understand and eventually formulate the conditions of possibility for getting out of such damned circle that I intend to proceed with a brief study of what you might call the metaphysical deconstruction of the violent act, as operated by Levinas, as I said before. My conviction is indeed that this extraordinary ethical thinker represents a powerful witness to the truth so well expressed by Plato and the Sophist, when the stranger of the dialogue takes upon himself the defense of discourse and underlines the metaphysical importance of our human ability to speak, not least because, he says, to rob us of discourse would be to rob us of philosophy. In other words, without the ability of discourse, the human spirit remains indigent and unable to properly develop our very nature. Accordingly, to reach an agreement about the nature of discourse is something of great importance, at least inasmuch as philosophy starts with the recognition that wisdom and love begins with the understanding of human life as what it really is, a conversation. The problem of violence, therefore, always begins by being a problem of discourse, that is, a problem of language and of understanding, so that it seems to me clearly appropriate to declare that violence is first and foremost a philosophical problem, that is, a question of hermeneutics. Hence my decision to bring before you this reading of Levinas, especially inasmuch as it offers a criticism of the tradition and reports the problem of violence back to its ontological roots, whereby the way to achieve this is clearly phenomenological and consists in the identification of our most common aversion to the alterity of the other, that is, the alterity of the other as other. I intend to concentrate here on totality and infinity, particularly insofar as this work represents a study of the meaning of being human in the theater of being, expression typical of Levinas. This is a project in which the author seems to be particularly concerned with the possibility of our own being duped by false morality, to be duped by morality, a Nietzschean topic of war. The basic idea is this: the openness of the human mind to truth implies the understanding and the recognition of the permanent possibility of war. But what is this possible war? For Levinas, it is precisely, he says, the ontological event as such, by which he means the movement of beings hitherto anchored in their identity, a mobilization of absolutes by an objective order from which there is no escape. Ontology describes in this case the logic of violence, and therefore it is rejected. That is the condition that properly starts not when people are injured or annihilated, but precisely when people are forced, Levinas says, to play roles in which they no longer recognize themselves, making them betray not only commitments but their own substance, making them carry out actions that will destroy every possibility of action. It is precisely in order to describe this vision of reality, of an order of being that is destructive of alterity, that Levinas uses the concept of totality. For him, in fact, this is the concept that dominates the history of Western philosophy from Plato to Husserl and to Heidegger. In this tradition, says the Jewish thinker, individuals are reduced to the condition of being bearers of forces that command them unbeknown to themselves. So that meaning, particularly the meaning of individual life, becomes just a function of and is derivative from totality. In this sense, the ontology of war becomes inseparable from the fact that only the consideration of the ultimate meaning, of the entire meaning of history, becomes an issue of significance for individuals. Hence the importance of the call not to let ourselves be deluded, at least not as long as we understand that, says Levinas, the peace of empires issued from war always tend to rest on war. Thus, to resist the logic of war implies a true defense of subjectivity of the human being. In this sense, totality and affinity evokes a very special kind of phenomenon, the one that can go by the name of prophetic eschatology. That is the dimension in which a relation with being beyond the totality or beyond history becomes possible. Such a relation with a surplus always exterior to the totality is precisely what is designated by the concept of infinity. And since the primordiality of being is set in terms of totality, in ontology, then it must also become clear that infinity can only be understood as that no totality can ever truly contain. The idea of infinity functions here as the instance that delivers subjectivity from judgment of history, that opens up the ontology of war to the process of non-violent peace. And this is the key to the problem, to make the transition, the transformation of an ontology of war into a process, eschatological, of course, of non-violent peace. But we also need to understand that subjectivity is much more than just an egoistic protestation against totality. Rather, the proper idea of human subjectivity is grounded in infinity. That is, in a dimension of reality that is never merely incidental, but instead represents an entirely new mode of being. So, like Franz Rosenzweig, the maître à penser, the teacher of Levinas considers that the most appropriate name for such an epiphany of being would be revelation. But we also must understand that such a beyond of revelation, in relation to any form of totality and objective experience, does not have to be described in purely negative terms. For him, this beyond is reflected within totality and history, that is within the field of human experience. As the eschatological does here, signifies here a call to being out of the strict jurisdiction of history or of a given vision of the future, and into the assumption of the most constitutive thing of any subjectivity. And it is, as anyone who reads Levinas knows, responsibility. As the primordial character of the ethical, and consequently the importance of the act of language as characteristic of the anthropological difference. After all, the induction of peace into the human world depends essentially on one fundamental thing: